Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. This is our last forum of the season. Our next one, sorry, I'm trying to move this microphone a little bit. There we go. Our next one will be in October. Because Labor Day falls late this year, it was a little too close to go with that second Thursday in September from when the newsletter is coming out. So we're going to have our first speaker in October. Very excited. She's coming to talk to us about AI, particularly in the media. So you're going to mark your calendars for that, the forum in October. But today, I'm really excited to have this presenter here today because I have it on pretty good authority, seeing as I'm the authority, that we will be making a trip to the Penn Museum in the fall. That's going to be one of our day trips. So, yes. So I really was like, you know what, I would love, because so many of you have told me, you know, your doctor is down at Penn Medicine and I drive by it all the time, what exactly happens in there? So I thought, you know what, we need to get somebody to come and talk about it. So I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Rorujorona Ferrell, thank you, Ferrell, the Assistant Director of Community Engagement and Programs at the Penn Museum. Please join me in welcoming her.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to probably jump around a little bit, and I have a lot of information, and I don't want to talk so much, so if there's a good stopping point or if there's a question that you want to interject, please do that. I also want to give a bit of a disclaimer. So again, I'm going to, like Mary Angela said, I'm going to talk a little bit more about like what we do at the Penn Museum and what all is there. Maybe not so much in depth about the things that are there, but I can give some general highlights of some of the items that are there in some of the regions that we feature in our galleries. So for the particular artifacts, I'll get into how you can engage with those as a visitor physically, and then even before you get there as well. So like what was said, my name is Rorujorona Ferrell, and I'm just going to give a general overview. This is kind of what I want to share today. So really, I'll introduce a little bit more about myself and kind of my place in the museum, and then a lot of these other details I want to share as far as our history and our mission of the organization, kind of also going over archaeology and anthropology, what those disciplines are, just to confirm we're all on the same page with that, and then sharing a little bit about our public programs, highlighting some of the materials that I put there on the table, and then any open discussion. Okay. So to start, so again, as I said, my name is Rorujorona Ferrell. I am the Assistant Director of Community Engagement. It's a little bit of a newer department within the museum, actually. It started maybe about 3 years ago. I've been at the museum about almost 7 years, and I actually joined the museum in our learning programs team. So my background actually is in education and social work. I've done a lot of teaching. I was principal for high school internationally for some years. I was living in India and Dominican Republic. And actually, so part of how I got connected with the museum was when I came back to the States, I really want to be able to continue to do intercultural education. And so that's how I got connected with the museum, because at the time we had a program called the International Classroom Program, where we worked with international scholars, be it like visiting scholars from other countries or international students or folks who had immigrated or refugees here, to support them in being able to share their story with local community members. So we supported them in having workshops either at the museum, or we are a liaison for them to do that in the community as well. So supporting with them really being the voice in some ways for cultural anthropology, which I'll speak about more. So that was my role when I started. That program kind of faded out, and then I took on this new role, which kind of expands on that in the way where I'm also able to do a little bit more intentional engagement with the community and other unique programming around cultural conversations. Okay? So that's kind of what my background is. Anyhow, so those are pretty much all the things about me. And that's just a link, I think, to my information. So, one thing I wanted to go over kind of in the background, so Rorujorona, so thinking about this almost in an anthropological way in linguistic anthropology, Rorujorona is one of one as far as a name. So I just kind of want to quickly break that down for you just to share that, where that name comes from. Because people often just say it and they may name like a particular ethnic group or community where it comes from. And I say, you know, it's just my mother being very creative and bohemian. So this is the actual origin of my name.
Wow.
So it's the first syllable of these names. So it's from my grandmother, Rosie. My mother really liked Ruth from the Bible. That was like her favorite character, like personality in the Bible. My uncle Joseph, my father Ronald, and my uncle Nathaniel. So that's where that name comes from, Rorujorona. So I want to share that kind of in the context of kind of, again, how these conversations that we sometimes will even have in the museum, as well as far as people's origin story, and that being kind of a telling of family culture and experience and things like that. So my short name, my nickname is Rougye. That's what I usually just go by. And I tell people, like, a good way to remember it is that it rhymes with Fuji, like Mount Fuji or Fuji apples, but still different. So that is me. So that's a quick intro there. And so what I want to jump into is the museum itself. So a bit of a historical overview, some content focus, and what our mission is. So foremost, how many of you have visited the museum?
A long time ago.
Okay, so a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Okay.
Long time ago.
Has anyone visited within like the past 7 or 8 years? No. Okay. So I'm super excited for you guys to come in the fall because there's been a lot of changes, and even now we are in the midst of renovating our most popular gallery, which is the Egyptian Gallery, and so that's going to finally come up to be in like its full splendor as it was kind of originally designed to be. So the Ancient Egypt and Nubian Gallery should be open at the end of this year. But just general history, so it started in 1887 officially. The museum started as the University Museum. And one of the unique things then about that is that, one, it is an academic museum. So in contrast to some other museums that may just hold a collection, we also are intent on actually doing research and scholarship around our collection, and that's part of even how some of the collection came to be, was in that process. Like I heard some people mentioning archaeology, also in the process of excavations that even individuals from the university themselves have been able to lead. So over the course of that time, we've actually been able to be a part of over 400 excavations from the archaeologists and the scholars within the museum or within the university itself have been either led them or been part of major excavations, including ones that are more local and community ones, be it in the city or within the states themselves. Anthropology Museum, of course, as you may know, so that's our focus is anthropology, so anything that goes under that banner, including archaeology. And within that collection, there's over 1 million artifacts. One thing, too, that's become a constant question or a constant discussion, too, is like, where did all those things come from? And so I will speak on that in a second, but that's part of, too, of the work that we do is really figuring some of those things out, right? If you think about the time span from 1887 to now, that's, a lot of our processes have changed, and things, the way things may have been collected at one time are a bit different now, and so we're trying to do a little bit of like backpedaling to figure out where some of those histories are, and that's part of the work that happens, too, amongst our team. One of the things that we're probably most known for is our Sphinx, the Sphinx that's in the collection, which is now in the main entrance. If you've been there years past, you probably recall it being in the lower Egypt Gallery. You kind of had to go down in the basement and see it. It's now the featured artifact, so if you come to the museum through the main entrance, that's the first thing you actually will see right in the lobby. So those are some of the highlights of what's currently in the museum. I also want to note the official name is the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, but our short name, of course, is just Penn Museum, and so that's what you'll typically see is a Penn Museum referring to that space. Are we all comfortable with the definition of the term anthropology? Okay, so I'm going to go over it just for, I'm used to sometimes working with our K through 12 audiences, and so I may give more simplified definitions than what your wisdom experience may require. So do not take it as an insult to intelligence. I just want to make sure I cover all bases. But I kind of almost start with kind of why anthropology a little bit. So really it's a study of human beings, their culture and society, their time and in any context. What I briefly say it sometimes I would just say is really the study of human beings past and present. So whatever that looks like to study humans being, right, as far as their physical, their mental, their, what they do, how they think. So it's really all of these things, looking at the diversity of the people across space and time. I often say that to people too when we talk about cultural differences, but it's not even just always regional. It's not like country to country or space to space. A lot of times too, it's time from time to time, right? So I always give the youth an example of like, your school experience, even if you may have went to the same school as your grandparents, may not be what their experience was, right? Because things change over time, and so there's also cultures across time. So we do a lot of that discussion. So under the umbrella of anthropology, there's 4 main verticals or 4 main disciplines that people usually go into, and there's a few more that are beyond that, but the major ones are archaeology, which everyone is probably most familiar with. So that's the process of excavation, of actually finding artifacts, physical materials that were created by humans. and doing research to understand what were the meanings and purposes of those things, or helping them put together other stories that are already incomplete, but they have parts of, to help fulfill some of those stories. There's culture anthropology, so really how are people living? What are their livelihoods? What is the meaning of what they do? What are the things that make up their way of life? And then there's biological, or sometimes called physical anthropology. So really the actual physical biology. So you may be familiar with some bioanthropology as far as studying human remains in different cases, or thinking about there's some traditions, be they indigenous traditions or other spaces where sometimes certain parts of the body were parts of maybe a ceremony or part of a ritual or things like that, things like the hair, something as simple as the hair being part of a design or a fabric, things like that. So really studying all those elements are part of the biological anthropology. And then there's linguistic anthropology, which really is how are we communicating and what does that mean? What are the different forms of communication and what does that mean for the people in their existence? So those are the major branches, and we really touch up on all those. So I'll come into the departments a bit later. So that's kind of reiterating what I was just saying. As far as what anthropology is, I did not know that was animated. And then that's again just kind of a visual of those four verticals. Yeah, so again, culture, kind of our way of being, our communication, our actual physical being, and then the things that we've created. And so we look at all of those things. What you would typically see when you come into the galleries are really the effect of the archaeology, so what have been the things that have been excavated. But what we're looking to do more and more is to really bring these things into discussion. We want to very much be sensitive around people's engagement with how they engage with the physical. So if there are spaces of human remains being in the gallery, we're very conscious of giving warnings about that. So if people don't want to interact with that, they don't have to. We've been conscious of constantly revisiting and reviewing what's actually on display and who can have access to what. So that's been a lot of the work we've done in recent years. A lot of bioanthropologists, they may come and visit the museum as far as to do research or things, but we don't necessarily think all those things have to be all out to the full public, right? We still want to respect those remains of all the individuals, known and unknown, as far as who they represent and what that means. And then linguistics as well. So these two actually are probably the ones where you'll see special programming at the museum around the cultural anthropology and around the linguistics. And that could be film screenings about different stories that are happening. That could be family programs. We have various family programs that happen very often. Our CultureFest, and sometimes things around special occasions come up. We may have an opportunity to work with a particular scholar or a celebrity of some sort, or someone else who has a specialization around the community or wants to have a dialogue around something. We host them. So there's a lot of opportunities that come up that way. And I did not realize I pushed the button. Lessons automatic. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. Okay. So that's that. So that's just, again, kind of with anthropology. Really across all these disciplines, the key methodology is fieldwork, so really going out and talking to the people, getting the information, doing the analysis, all those things, surveys, whatever that may look like. And so there tends to be a bit of a branch within the museum of kind of who's focused, not a full branch, I wouldn't say a full separation, but we also, as we're part of the university, there's also the separate department of anthropology, where that is very much focused on the students and the scholarship. Then we also have the scholars who are in both of those spaces, who provide research and support to what's happening in the museum, as well as what's happening with our student population. And then there's individuals, particularly like our keepers of different curatorial sections, like those who are over it, who are more focused on the actual artifact collection for different regions themselves. And so those are good people to connect with when you come in. We also have what's known as collection study rooms, which is when we're able to bring artifacts out of the storage for people to view, and that sometimes can be actual student groups or other scholars, and sometimes it's special groups as well. So one thing we often engage with is our K through 12 educators across the region, so particularly those who may be working in the physical sciences, or they may be doing cultural studies, or they may be a linguistics teacher, so maybe they're teaching Spanish culture and history or something, or Mexican culture and Spanish language, and maybe they want some of the artifacts that are from the excavations that have happened in that region, and we can bring them out and maybe show it to the teacher so they have more understanding and background information about those particular artifacts to share with their students. So we have those type of engagements we do as well. We try to do a lot of support of educators, as well as, of course, having the students come in for field trips. Again, those type of engagements exist. That's, again, just kind of going over culture and what our engagements are, things that we have a lot of conversations and discussion on. But really trying to frame it this way. What I want to say. Yeah, so really the shared understanding of people and groups. Again, I'm kind of used to how I say this sometimes with our K through 12 groups, and I always say culture is normal, right? So culture is normal being literally for whatever culture you're in, like that's your normal experience, and how do we like respect that across differences, and how do we learn about it and approach it that way? And so thinking about all these things that are actually a component of culture. So those are some of the programs that we lean towards. Sorry, that's a very general discussion there. But yeah, trying to give them the simplified idea of like, these are some of the things. So these are some of the tenets of what a lot of our programs may be around, as far as like food and drink. So we have this program that people love. It's a public program called Ancient Alcohol. And so it used to, I think it used to be wine as well, but mainly it's like ancient beer. And so thinking about how that was created and how people drank it and used it, and kind of what is the history of that particular beverage. And see, people will come in, and then in the cafe they may have a sample of a certain beer that was recreated based on that historical thing, the historical process of a particular region from like the classic world. So that's one popular program. And then thinking about things like the arts and traditions. So other programs we have may be like a particular like weaving workshop, so around particular weaving that comes out of maybe Central America, and really being able to do that process, but then also learn about what does that mean in context. Or maybe like a tea ceremony, and that could be like with Chinese tea, we may have a specialist come in and speak about that, or with Indian masala chai and teas, we may have that, and we like create a kit and you can take that with you and do things like that. So we often have those things that happen throughout the year. And for particular groups, we do it a lot now with our graduate students on campus. They have the opportunity to come in maybe like once every few months for different programs, particularly high school students we think about as well. So we have a program for them as well every few months, particularly because one of our consciousness is like, how do we engage populations who don't typically go to museums? And like, because our focus is, I think this will come across when I speak about our thing. Sorry, this is what I mean when I'm jumping all around. But our mission, which I think was also kind of drew me to the museum and keeps me there, is like this idea of our shared human experience, which is kind of the title here. And so it gives us, the museum really functions as this beautiful space for us to have a lot of those conversations and engagements in a lot of different ways. I actually did my master's at Penn years ago, and then doctorate there later on. But even I, as a student, sometimes would see this building and be like, oh, that's not for me. And not because it was like a museum, because I've always loved museums, but just like the position of it and where it sits and how it's set. Like sometimes you walk by and it's like, oh, I don't know if that's a public building. And that's something we always have to tell everyone, like it is a public space. It is for everyone. It is accessible. And so really getting people to not only see it as, oh, this is a place I can visit, but also a space like I can have as like a community space, right? I can do some learning and engagement in this space. I can be, empowered in that way. And so we do have a range of programming that happens there. So this is what the museum looks like today. That's kind of our main entrance. If you've been there or not, a favorite is our koi pond. That's right there in front of the main entrance. A great like respite in the middle of campus is just sitting and resting there and being out in the daytime. But one thing I want to bring up is this historical map. So this is like a personal thing that I always enjoy showing. I'm like also a person who really loves like architecture and design and history in that context. So I'm always a little bit heartbroken that the museum is not what it was originally envisioned and designed to be architecturally. But this is actually the original design of it, what they had planned, over 100 years ago. And what's kind of shaded there is what is the actual footprint we take up. And as you are familiar with now, a lot of that extra footprint now is like the hospital and Penn Medicine, the regional rail station is there and all those things. Which I want to point out is like, it's literally like a 3-minute walk away from the museum. So if you're coming on regional rail, you're really just crossing the street and you're at the museum. So it's a great way to get there. Yes, ma'am?
When was all of that taken away from the...
So that's the thing, it was never taken away.
Oh, okay.
That was the original plan. That was the original plan, yeah. So thankfully it wasn't stripped away, but they were planning to build it in sections, and they got to one section and then of course had to pause as things do, like financially or whatever. And I think at that time then other entities came in and was like, okay, we'll utilize this land and space. Yeah. So it was only kind of got up till this wing here, this highlighted, and then we kind of filled in some of this other space, but it's not the same type of design. So if you're at the building, you'll see it looks like almost 2 buildings attached. It's like this, not to value the different architectural styles, but you'll see this wonderful piece here, and then something that's maybe more a Brutesque type of a style that's attached, which is our academic wing, and then the main wing, which is a mix of like academic and also scholarship wing. So there's a little bit more there, but it's not in that same design. I just always like to show it because I love the design of what it was intended to be. But yeah, so that was kind of the initial design there. Yeah, tell me.
What do you mean by scholarship area?
So, excellent question. So, scholarship, so like those are some of our keepers of the collections. So, it's like whoever's the keeper or the head curator for like the Africa collection or the Eastern Mediterranean collection, the indigenous collection. So, those are the faculty members who are really like doing a lot of the research and have the knowledge, the like in-depth knowledge of what's in those collections. And that's probably what they've studied for their degrees or their doctorates and things. So those are what I mean by the scholars. So the intellectual knowledge and keepers of those collections are usually in that wing and maybe working on either additional projects or additional research or just maintaining the collection, not just maintaining the collection, but maintaining the collection, all of those things around that. That's kind of where they are. Yeah, so their offices and also what I was mentioning earlier, those collection study rooms, some of them are in those spaces as well. So they, again, are spaces where they can take things out of the collection and then they would oversee any public member, be it someone outside of the museum or outside the university, being able to engage and interact with those objects. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Because I know I'm kind of like running. Okie dokie. So this is another picture I like to show and highlight because, again, kind of going back to this idea of it being a space of public access that is not just for like a particular group of people. It really has been a long-term investment, and of course it's evolved, and we're going through various improvements. But it's been a long-term investment also to be a space of education, right? Not just a collection and show, show and tell type of thing, or like you figure it out yourself type of thing, but really to like long-term engage with the audiences, be they youth from our middle schools or elementary schools, or from scholars who are experts in a particular area. And so this, of course, is a picture of some children in the 1920s. You can see there who were visiting the education department at that time. So just kind of highlighting the fact that teaching and that dialogue has really been a part of the museum for some time. So kind of coming what I was getting to, so this is our mission. We went through a strategic plan revisioning a few years ago, and it very much still captures the spirit of what we had before, but this is the exact verbiage of it. So our mission is to be a center for inquiry and the ongoing exploration of humanity for our University of Pennsylvania, regional, national, and global communities following ethical standards and practices. So that's really the essence of what we look to do, and one of the I think the things that we're grateful for and kind of blessed to have is that we are a sizable and relatively well-resourced museum as far as like of course there may be things we would like more of and things, but when you think about other institutions that may be smaller, we're able to actually have a lot of specialists in different areas to make certain things happen. And so we really can have people kind of dedicated to each of these things, as far as people who are dedicated to what's happening in the galleries, what's happening out in the community, what's happening with the students on campus, what's happening with students who are not on campus, all of these type of things. And when I say not on campus, I mean other universities outside of Penn. So this is kind of our foundation, what we come back to. So, so like I was saying, so see, these are some of the goals of what we aim to do with our work. So cultural heritage, so really focusing and supporting cultural heritage. We have something within the museum called the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, and I may be mixing up the acronym, but they're specifically involved on working with preserving culture across the globe. So working with other cultural institutions, so like when there was, so with the unrest that had been happening like in the Ukraine, so we had scholars who were working with the cultural institutions there and helping them think about how do they preserve those materials. Some who've been visiting those spaces as well across Eastern Europe and other spaces. How do they maintain those collections? Who do they transfer them to? Like how to support that? They've been having a lot of dialogue and work with there. So those type of like immediate physical things, but also just even like again advising and cultural, like advising and supporting other ways too, just intellectual. Like I mentioned sort of time and time again, the research that happens across the board. So not only do we have our scholars as far as like the doctors and the curators and things who are there, but like our graduate students, undergraduate students. We've gotten into having high school interns as well, and we're very committed to the past like 4 or 5 years really making sure that they are supported. So we offer only paid internships for those groups, and some of them are maybe short-term like summer internships, some of them may be full-year like assistantships, so maybe someone who's more of a graduate student, and giving them opportunities to really not only to be like seeing but also be doing and learning and be a part of the research and work in different ways. So those are things that are happening, and also cross-institutional. So Bryn Mawr College, I believe, also has an anthropology department, and I think there's a few other local ones, and also like being a space of support for those students so they can come and be a part of what's happening in the museum space. Interpretive plan, which is really kind of a fancy way of saying like, what is this? How do we tell people about what this stuff means, right? Or what this stuff represents? And so that's part of our current plan too, is working on better ways of communicating the stories. So what does this particular artifact mean in context, specifically, but also on a broader scope, how does that compare, or how can you connect with that based on your own cultural experience? So thinking about how do we broaden that experience, and it's really, we have some really wonderful interactives within the galleries if you go and see it. This is probably one of my favorite ones, actually, the stela that's in the Mexico and Central America gallery, because what they're looking at is this stone stela, really intricately carved, and we have this projector that highlights all the actual lines on it. So when they push that button on that panel in front of them, they can see the actual highlights of all the details of it. So it's really a nice engagement there. Storytelling. So again, similar to the interpretive plan, how are we sharing these stories out? But not just like, I think a combination of what are we saying, but how are we saying, and who gets to tell the stories. So that goes back to the program I spoke about earlier, like our international classroom program, of not having just academic scholars come in and speak, but also having community members who have that lived experience and expertise in regional or local or global cultural experience to be able to share those stories and add to the understanding of the nuance of things that are that people may have questions about. So really kind of approaching in that way. That's one of our educators. That's our associate director actually of interpretive planning, who works a lot with our docent community volunteers, many of them who've been there for years, who are really wonderful, and then also our K-12 programs. Collection practice, again, the focus on that. So there's people focused on just, again, how do we collect things? You know, what are we collecting? What are our policies around that? So kind of what are we bringing in, and then also how are we keeping those things, how are we keeping them in their best condition? So how are we storing them and accessing them? Who has access to them? So kind of respecting the artifacts all the way around, like what are we choosing to take in, or what things do we need to what things are we open to loaning out to other institutions? So we also do that often. If someone is having an exhibition around a particular theme, and we happen to have something from that particular region in our collection, we may loan or borrow it out to them. And there's a full team who actually does that work to say, all right, let's figure out the logistics of that, packaging it up, shipping it safely, or sometimes even traveling with it to that space to make sure it arrives in a certain condition and then bringing it back. So again, there's people who are focused on that. And then constant maintenance as well. So if you're familiar with the museum, the Penn Museum is open Tuesday through Sunday. We're only closed Mondays. The Monday tends to be the day that our conservators can get into the galleries to do a lot of that maintenance. So if they have to do some cleaning on a particular artifact, or if they have to cycle things out, then that's the day that they often do that. If you've been in our museum or any other ones, you may notice in different galleries the lighting changes. Particularly for ours is things having to do with like textiles or other things that may require a different type of lighting, right? So we want to be mindful of preserving it as much as possible. We may have lower lighting. One of the other ways that we do preservation around that too is that we sometimes keep things only on display for a certain amount of time. So maybe it's a 3-month rotation or a 6-month rotation. Again, that's the type of thing where they will rotate those things out on that Monday date. So a lot of that work happens there as well. And then another huge thing that happens is our programming. So around the gallery spaces is being able to have events and people come in either for lectures or for like festivals or for film screenings or for special workshops. We really do try to offer a mix of things for, again, sort of a broad range of community members and interests. And another thing too is that people often think of our museum, or any museum, right, as a physical space, but we also try to make it accessible online. So one of the great things that we have is we really have a team that's really dedicated and working hard to make sure all of our collections are available to at least get a glimpse of online. And so we have a really vast online database, which you can also explore. And I think I have a slide there. Okay, so what's at the museum? we're all familiar with what an artifact is. Okay, I don't have to go over that. So essentially, anything that's made or modified by humans. So kind of the difference here is like, this is an actual rock, which wouldn't necessarily be an artifact, but this here is a spearhead, which actually has some human intervention that carved that. So that would be the distinction. Okay, so I'm going to skip these other items here. I like them because they're like cute, because that's what I can show to the youth, like the toy versus the actual one. It's actually those both are artifacts because they had human intervention. But then also noting, so really these are the things that the archaeologists and curators and scholars are able to learn from, is really what's happening in these different places. So these were just two locations historically where the museum has had a presence as far as with excavation. But stepping beyond the galleries, so I think also people are familiar with conservators and their work somewhat. So our conservators really do the work of, again, I say, of keeping things maintained. So this was this is the bull lyre that was kind of in a condition where it was in ill condition, and that's kind of been cleaned up. So that's really what they, take care of our artifacts in different ways. This one?
Yeah.
The bull, am I calling this the wrong thing? No. This is, I'm going to call this the wrong name. So there's something similar that's the bull lyre that's the head of a harp. But this is kind of like a ram in the thicket, and I don't know if that's the actual name of it, but it's from our Middle Eastern collection, in a statue. And I honestly don't recall the full story of it.
What is it made of?
It's made, I believe, of a mix of, I think this is some type of a gold foil here, and I'm not sure. I'm going to be guessing, honestly, for these other parts here. I want to say it's some type of a shell or stone, but I'd have to look at the components of it. Yeah. This is a popular one people often look to, but I can't recall if it's on display in the gallery or not, because it actually looks very much like the bull lyre, which I'm more familiar with, which is actual like bull head, which has similar coloring and texture, so I think it's the same material, but it was like the forefront of a harp or some type, or a musical lyre type of an instrument. This one is more of a statue, but I think I'd have to look at the story again what that one is. But I know it's in our Middle East gallery. Yeah. What is? Yeah, it's a popular one. But yeah, I'd have to look that detail up and get it back to you. Okay, so our conservator there, artifact we're keen on. Of course, these are all the things that they're conscious of taking care of and mindful of in both the storage process as well as in the galleries. So again, folks focus on making sure there's minimal light, we're not attracting pests, we're keeping things out of pollution and away from water, and keeping things protected from physical force. So again, people are focused on those items, those particular tasks as far as keeping the object safe. And these are just examples of things that have not gone well, and having to fix and recreate those things, which they were restored. So I don't think you need to see all those, but those are just examples of like paper products that hadn't been properly maintained. I don't think these are all from our collection, but just examples of deterioration of things that have not been well supported. A cracked, I believe that's the front case was why am I thinking missing words? I want to say sarcophagus. I'm thinking the wrong word. But that was in ill repair from pollution, and that had to get cleaned up. Cleaning again of textiles, or maintaining of textiles, is a particularly concerned one. So again, seeing the issues with lighting that may happen, so keeping things out of too much extra light. This was a textile from India. This particular painting style from Northeast India, from Bengal, and I forget the type name of it. But it had suffered water damage, and essentially the way to repair this was to like stretch it out further and to do some type of an ironing process, which they ultimately did. for those type of things. Again, lighting, being aware of what type of lighting even things are sensitive to and what it showcases as part of being able to examine them to see what's actually underneath and what they're actually cleaning it up to be able to showcase. So that a lot of digital technology increasingly is used more in some of these processes too. And that was a Egyptian item I was referencing before, so that had to go through a process of that being cleaned. And again, it's, and all these things are being done too with the understanding of what's reasonably possible. It's kind of like, what can we do to make it better without causing further harm? So this may not be restored to the original coloration, but it's what they can do with the cleaning products that they have. So they're not looking to like recreate it, but to preserve what's there. So that type of a thing is also part of that conservation process. The only time I think you would see something where it looks like they're restoring something to like a newer presentation than what it actually is, maybe more so the support in the casing, that like when it's put into a case. So it's again not on the artifact itself, but maybe how it's displayed and how it's supported actually in the casing in the galleries. And that's more work with like our mount makers and fabricators, those who are supporting the actual exhibition process. So again, that was quite an engineering process. So again, a lot of the work of the conservatorship is very meticulous and like detail oriented, but really is it really is a labor of love to maintain these things and bring them back to the condition that you would like them to be in. So even that, like if that had happened in my house, it would have just been in the waste bin. But like they do this diligent work of, going back and piecing all these things together. And these aren't things that happen all the time, but these are the things they're, put in the work to avoid them happening. But when these things do come up, there are individuals who are really dedicated to make sure we can restore these things as much as possible back to their original condition. And so again, that is why things are in cases. That's why we tell our young guests, be careful, not run all these things. And of course, that those preventative measures. So like I was saying about that one, it was just a process of stretching it out, in particular drying to get that back into its original condition. And that's that. And so we also have spaces too of things that are kind of in the waiting. So be it things that may have been recently created or things that have, that may need some attention. That's all the work that they're also doing there.
What is that actually?
So that's one of the. We've actually changed this now. I believe we're actually in the process of getting new spaces, but these are really just like storage spaces.
No, I
Oh,
know
right
that.
here?
Yes. What is that item? I can't figure it out.
You know what? I can't either. I believe it's something in our Egypt collection, but I couldn't tell you more than that.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what it is because of the way it's bagged up. I may take that back because it looks like it may be a textile on top of something holding it under, like to a certain shape underneath. Because it seems like maybe a pillowy thing, so I'm not for sure what that one is. Because this is one of our older pictures of our storage, and we've actually since been updating them. Like this is probably a good 8 or 9 year old photo, so I'm not for sure. But that's a good question of curiosity. I have to see if I can read the label at another time. So yeah, just the general rules that we tend to have in the galleries for that reason, to keep things preserved. So that's why the flashing light makes a difference. Like for textiles, all that light can be a damaging agent. And of course, just people not touching things because oils on their hands may cause decay, and then also people running and buffing these over. So those are the things. So when I said earlier about specialization, and us kind of being a rich space of resources in a way, I mean, relative to some of maybe our small institutions, there's several departments that kind of make the museum itself run. So this is like half of them. So we have a lot of specializations. We have those who are focused on particular collections, like our Africa, America, Asia, Babylonian collection, Egyptian collection, which is probably our most popular and maybe one of the more extensive collections, and then all these other centers. Our Center for the Analysis of Archaeological Materials, they really focus on the in-depth, like it says in the title, analysis of the items that we may have in the collection, all these spaces. And then also, even more so, so our teams that are more outward focused, our Learning and Public Engagement team, and then all these other sections, Mediterranean, Near East, special projects. That's what I was referencing earlier, the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, who does a lot of the global work with other cultural institutions. So there really is a lot of things that happen in this museum space, be it with what's happening inside, but also how we work across other communities of archaeology and anthropology.
On the first screen, you had executive team.
Mm-hmm.
What do they concentrate their interest in? I mean, it isn't just staff and human resources. Are they the group that picks which item is going to be?
That's an excellent question. So they, in a way, they function as a board of directors, right? And they may be, everyone has a specialization over particular areas of the museum. So there's our actual director. There's a director who may be focused on the collections. Someone's position is like head over collections. So they kind of pull everyone together from like the Africa section, leadership, the American, the Egyptians. That's their focus. There's someone who's over staff and community engagement. There's someone who's over all the public programming. And so they really are the head of those things, because some of these things have specialized departments in the museum, and so they help bring all that together. And they're pretty much like the executive voice. So a lot of those like special projects, they may collaborate on all those things together to kind of make a decision on that. So I'm not sure I'm fully answering your question. If you want to repeat it, so I can.
Well, partially.
Mm-hmm. So you want to say your
I
question?
want to know who's the group that decides. Well, maybe it's them. What section are you going to concentrate on? Or is it just fundraising they do?
So I would say they have their hands in all of the things, and they're probably the final decision makers, right? So there may be things that emerge in like another department or another section, but it may have to go through the executive team for finalization. So for example, a curator in the Egyptian section, maybe they have an opportunity where they want to work with a university in Cairo about something. Right, and they may have the autonomy to do certain things to an extent, but there may be a certain level of that where involves certain resources from the museum, further support from the museum for them to go there, things like that. Then they would also need to confer with the executive team possibly to get some of those resources or confirmations, right, or some of those permissions that may be needed for the international work. So in that way, that's why I say they kind of almost work as sort of a board of directors to support, and they're also people who are specialized over particular things. There also are things that may be initiated from the executive team. So because the executive team includes everyone who's kind of ahead of specialized departments, they may have collectively already talked about certain things they see emerging and developing and saying, hey, we need to maybe do this thing. And so then maybe it's more of a, then sharing it out to those departments that are beneath them. So it can kind of come from both ways. Certain things that can happen without the executive team, but certain things that may happen at a particular departmental level may need that approval or support from the executive team. So for example, too, if someone in a department was saying, oh, I want to go to a professional development workshop this year, or I want to present at a conference and want support from the museum, like they can attend the conference, but the people who may be approving that support, like the resources for them to go attend the conference, maybe that's coming from the executive team who's going to review that application.
One last question. Do you have a lot of angels in reference to
Like physical artifacts or resource support?
resource support
So-
and backing financially?
So there's a committed development department who does a lot of like seeking out fundraising and resources. And we also are in this unique position because we're an academic museum. So we get supporters who like really want to invest in cultural institutions in general. So from the general public who may make donations. We also have alumni who want to support the university who are maybe donors. We get kind of both of those pools. And then the development department does the work of particularly any development officer as far as like they may do the scouting and as far as knowing, we know these individuals in the wider community, they like to support this type of a cause, and maybe they'll proactively go out and solicit for them to support. One of the huge things that's been happening with the development department right now is the Egyptian gallery, which is reopening. That's a huge project that's literally millions of dollars, and they've been doing a lot of work to develop those relationships to get those funds for that project to happen, and so that's something that's still in process. And so there's been a bit of like people who voluntarily come forward to support, but there's also been a lot of proactiveness from the museum itself to go out and make those requests. There are people, so part of the support may come from membership, people who are members of the museum, so that may be some of the financial support. Then there are those who are donors at all the levels. There may be some who are, in the hundreds and thousands, and then there's some who are in the, 100,000s and maybe even millions. We've had some donations where they've been of such a level where they've named spaces after the donors. We have our North Native American Gallery is named after a donor. We have like these spotlight galleries we have at the museum. Those are named after donors, things of that nature. Some of our entrances historically were named after donors, and so those type of funding levels are possible as well. And then also I don't think, and I'm not in the space to say particularly what the dollar amount is because that's not my department or area. But I know there's also levels because we're within a larger institution. We may also get some funding from the university as a whole as part of that unit. And then the other funds will come in also because of the admissions, people visiting the museum also was part of the support as well. So there's a few different income streams for how the things are supported. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm curious, is there like a, say timeline, but I've noticed that a lot of the things, at least from when I was there, which was a solid 15 years ago, are for like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Is there like a cutoff? Because at this point, I mean, Philadelphia is 250 years old plus, and I know we had indigenous people here before we were here. So I'm wondering, like, how does the Penn Museum sort of decide where that like time cutoff is, what they're focusing on? Because I know like Egyptian that's like BC, which is great. We've got all that, but I'm wondering, is there a cutoff?
Like a cutoff of what time periods we're focusing on in the galleries?
Yeah.
So most of our galleries are permanent collections. I would say permanent collection exhibition galleries. So that really is coming from what do we already have and how do we want to showcase it. And so in that way, the timeline is somewhat static. If you visited all, our collection is fairly relatively ancient, particularly for certain regions. So like Egyptian is heavy on the ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia, and that's not really going to change. Because that's what we have in the collection, and I wouldn't say that we're actively looking to collect more. The way that we try to have a conversation between the sort of more ancient artifacts and the contemporary is with a lot of our programming. So we may try to bring in Egyptian scholars, Egyptian students, individuals like that who want to talk about maybe the contrast of like Egypt then, Egypt now, or how people's current Egyptians' view on XYZ of ancient Egypt, that type of thing. So that's just for an example. So as far as our main galleries, those collections and timelines don't really change. And that's across the board. So if you think about the Roman Gallery, the Etruscan Gallery, the Eastern Mediterranean, many of those collections are from a particular period of time, and we're not looking necessarily to update them. What has maybe more contemporary pieces in a wider range, and that's because those galleries are recently updated in the past 7 or 8 years, and we've been able to engage with more contemporary either artists or individuals from those communities, is the Africa Gallery, and also the Mexico Central America Gallery, and then of course our North Native American Gallery. And that's particularly because those ones were recently updated. So for example, with the Africa Gallery, again, you have artifacts from the Benin Kingdom and so many decades and so many centuries ago, right? But we also have things that are more contemporary from, like, for example, an African student working with an African American student, and they were able to create this textile piece in the past 5 or 10 years that represented like particular crafts from the Ghanaian kingdom. And so they created this really beautiful dress piece that's also in the gallery. So again, being able to tell contemporary stories that way. Or even in the North Native American Gallery, we've had contemporary indigenous artists who've created these sort of commentary pieces, I'll say, on like the conditions maybe in their particular tribal community, and that's part of what's in the gallery, as well as things that have been excavated from decades and centuries ago in the community. So in certain spaces we're able to tell a wider breadth of timeline because that's who we've engaged in updating those galleries. In other ways, in other spaces, it's kind of this is what we have and we're going to rotate what we are showing you, but we're expanding the story and the timeline by kind of who we're bringing in to have some conversations or do the programming.
Well, in that vein, I'd like to ask on the North American Native Indians.
Mm-hmm.
I saw what you had years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but has it been updated now? Because there's been great change in
Ma'am.
their lives.
You asked the best question. Okay, so let me see if I can put it. I'm pointing at the wrong thing. There we go. So this gallery was actually just updated this past year.
Oh,
The thing that like I absolutely loved and was so excited about it is that when they started working on this, maybe 3 years ago, I would say, they were very intentional to work with indigenous archaeologists and anthropologists. So there were 8 indigenous archaeologist curators who were part of the team, as well as the academic leadership that's already at the museum. And they were intentional to work with indigenous leaders from across the country. So we kind of represented the 4 regions as far as the Southwest, the West, Northwest, somewhat, you know, around our region, like so Lenape, all the folks kind of around the East, and then also sort of the Southeast region. And so that's kind of who's in this photo here. It's both our staff here, Dr. Maggie Pasabon and Lucy Fowler-Williams, who are on staff at the museum, but also these scholars from across the country, including some who may have studied at Penn, but there's scholars from all over the country who are indigenous archaeologists and anthropologists, and they work together as curators to really create what this new gallery is. And so this is the front of the new gallery. If you were to come in, it actually just opened up in November this past year.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really wonderful engagement kind of all throughout. They've been a part of this process, advising, having the conversations about like why you shouldn't put that thing on display. This is the thing you should put on the display. This is how the new gallery should be designed. This is who should be involved. All those conversations they were a part of. And then we did a lot of programming, opening it up, showcasing it to the community. And then what we try to continue to do is have like those conversations and other programming to continue to go on and engage around what's happening in that space. So sometimes these, and I think some of the curators too, like they were able to travel at different times, but then also we were able to support that financially for them to come and be on site versus sometimes maybe it was a video meeting. So all of that support to make sure that they were able to be fully involved and continue to offer programming. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When you say update, you mean there's been like discovery from further digs that they found?
That's an excellent question. So updating as far as the foremost, I mean like the gallery itself was updated. So previously the gallery was Native American Voices, and it was supposed to be a temporary project, and it ended up being up I think for several years longer than it was planned. And so it was time to update what that theme of the gallery was. That's when they stepped back and said, okay, let's do this actually with community members leading it. And so the update was a holistic update. It wasn't necessarily from new artifacts, but it was in some ways like, what story do we want to tell now? And we want to make sure that's the story that's coming from the community versus something that we, as people maybe outside the community, have imagined as how we want to tell the story. And so that may include some new artifacts, and actually I would say it does in the sense that having the conversations with indigenous curators, they were able to showcase, hey, this is this thing in our community that we actually would be open to sharing in this space, or this is something maybe you shouldn't have on display in the future. Like I was saying before, maybe this is not a thing we want on display or whatever. So there may have been things maybe we have on loan that are in this collection that weren't particularly in our collection before, and so there's a mix of that. So it's things maybe we already had in our storage, but now they're on display again for this current exhibition, and a lot of those things will be rotated again because they're textiles or sensitive light or whatever, but there are probably things on loan or things that people maybe have dedicated for this particular exhibition. But it wasn't driven by the artifacts, I think more so by the general content, like the general theme and just need for that refreshing. But there's an opportunity to do a full lift and review.
Thank you.
Okay. We're probably about at time, yeah? Okay, so I'm just gonna wrap and say just, this was like a lot. And I want I know there's a lot more that people may be thinking, but I also want to just highlight some of the public programs we have coming up to show the breadth of things. So this is like called Pop Spirit Hunters. This is like, for example, one of our Family Day programs. I think it's just paid regular admission, but there'll be activities around all these things. This is inspired by, I don't know if people have heard this at all. There's been this animated feature that people have loved the past year called K-Pop Demon Hunters. Okay, so this is kind of around that, but again, trying to take more of an almost cultural anthropological lens at it for the family. So it's activities thinking about these themes in general. So spirits across different communities, or particularly like demon hunting spirits or things like negative or bad or good spirits and things like that. So it's meant to be a fun and engaging thing that's for the family. So there may be activities, there's like performances, I think like K-pop performances, things like this that are happening. But these are kind of some of the like special events that we have. So that one is coming up at the end of this month, and that's like an evening. And then we have things that may be also more for like scholars and lifelong learners who are particularly interested in things that are happening. We have a few things happening around 250. So this is a film series that I believe has already started, but this will be a free film people can come and see. And it's a story particularly looking at like Philadelphia in the scope of the 250th. So not even necessarily the full scope of the nation, but really kind of what Philadelphia's piece is in that. And I believe this is a 10-part series, and the second episode that we'll be playing at the beginning of June, so they may have just had the first one already. And that would be a free event, so people would just need to register on the website and they could attend that. And that's another evening event. And then the one that's a flyer here in the back, I'll showcase. I don't know why that is doing funny things. Okay. Yeah, it's not showing up properly, but we're hosting an event. It's on the back table. It's also a free event. It's called Penn and Philly 250. And that's really looking at themes around culture, celebration, and freedom during the 250th year, thinking about the freedom holidays. In addition to the freedom holidays we typically celebrate in the summer, including Juneteenth and the 4th of July, Independence Day. And so really this has been a wonderful collaboration that's coming together across the university. So we've been hosting a smaller version of this, relatively smaller because now it's everyone in the university, but the past few years, but now they'll be across the university, so we'll have like wellness vendors, just general health things. We'll have retail vendors, we'll have food trucks, we'll have performers, vocalists, drummers, dance, activities for the children, face painters, henna, and then also education, like even specifically educational engagement. So pop-up exhibitions around artifacts in certain galleries, around cultural anthropology in the community. So we have actually a unit at the university or at the museum who's done a lot of community archaeology in West Philadelphia. So they'll showcase and share some of that information. And then other discussions with scholars from our Center from Communication, the School of Communication, from the School of Africana Studies, the Weissman School of Design, about design students working with things in the community and community development and things. So it's really this wonderful mix of all the stuff, and we get to host it in our space. And of course, the galleries are open, and that's a free day. That's Saturday, June 13th. So these are kind of our summer tends to be some of our bigger public events, but that's one of them. And then if people are familiar with Wawa Welcome America, we're always one of the spaces that are open on that day as well. And I don't remember the actual date, but it's on the website. So if you want to attend the Penn and Philly 250, though, that's the registration, or you can get the flyer in the back. But yes. Okay, I think that's the essence of all of it. So, yeah, so we're here, and we're trying to do all the things. And then if you want to contact me for anything directly, you can feel free to do that. Phone number is there. Email is just communityengagement@pennmuseum.org. Sorry, they got it cut off when I Yeah. So it cut off that way. But yeah, I think that's in essence all the things. So if there's anything I missed, feel free to message me, and I'll try to, and if I don't have the answer, I'll work on getting the answer for you. If there's things like, but we're accessible, we want everyone to visit, so please do. And sometimes if there's a matter of a resource too that you are interested in, and you don't necessarily need to visit or whatever, you can also look us up online. Because that's the one thing I also want to highlight. Sorry, and I'll be done talking for real. I can come back, sorry. I don't know, I'm pointing at the screen. So Heritage West is a group I'm talking about. This was led by two scholars who did cultural anthropology in the community. That's who that was. And they work with West Philadelphia residents. But this is what I wanted to point out. So our online collections are our collections are online. So if you wanted to actually see what some of the artifacts are, get information about them, you can go to, if you want a QR code or this same place, Penn Museum is our website /collections, and you can actually kind of do your own exploration of the full collection. And this is a really nice tool because while the gallery can only hold so much, you can pretty much get our full collections online to see what's in here. Yeah. So please feel free to take advantage of that if you were trying to find a particular resource. And then if you happen to if there's not enough information on there again, you can always reach out to us to be like, hey, can somebody tell me a bit more about this? Or sometimes too, that's how people find things too when they want to come into our collection study room. They're like, hey, I saw this thing online, can I come in and see it? It varies who can do that, and that's not always open to the general public to do that, but depending on if you're working on a research project or something, or there's a particular reason that may be allowed. So feel free to connect with us to do that. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Any exhibits that have to be temporary?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So there's one gallery particularly we have, the Merle Smith. I was giving that to you back. It's like a talking piece to get me to stop talking. But like, we have one special exhibition hallway on our ground floor, and that one rotates maybe every 6 to 12. Actually, there's 2 galleries. That one rotates maybe every 6 to 12 months, and sometimes it's the full gallery, and sometimes there's 2 smaller exhibitions in it. Right now, one half of that is on ancient Assyria, and is very focused on Assyria, and the other one is on these watercolor collections from Egypt.
Oh, Egypt.
So that's what's currently in there. And then another smaller space we have upstairs, it's like a temporary, is our Idea Lounge. And that one actually tends to be focused on our student engagement. So like our undergraduate or graduate students who are working with faculty members may do a short-term exhibition for like 6 to 12 months. And they get to work on curating and developing, and that's on display for a short amount of time. And that one's always really fun because it's unique themes. Like one year was on maritime archaeology, so looking at different like water pathways and culture around water movement. One time it was on the color blue, so looking at indigo and other things that kind of incorporate that. So that's always a nice one to come and see.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all so much for being here. That was really fascinating. I'm looking forward to our trip in the fall. So if you want to stick around and grab some snacks on your way out, please do. We've got flyers that are back there. The flyer she was talking about is up there, as well as a couple other booklets that she brought from the Penn Museum. So please take advantage of that. And our next upcoming events are up there as well. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.